tonight on First at 9, this Monday the 14th of October 2024. Diplomatic interaction. Sri Lanka's foreign minister pledges to Colombo-based diplomats government's commitment to inclusive growth, rule of law and zero tolerance for corruption. Says human rights and accountability will be dealt through domestic mechanisms.
The government will protect democracy and human rights of all citizens, including addressing past issues.
Sri Lanka also responds to attack on UN peacekeepers in Lebanon.
Sri Lanka opposes the resolution which establishes an external mechanism on human rights issues.
Incessant rains. Severe weather leaves over 150,000 affected across Sri Lanka. Schools in Colombo Education Zone closed due to heavy rainfall and flooding. Imprisoned. Colombo magistrate sentences Arjun Aloysius to 6 months imprisonment for defaulting 3.5 billion VAT payments. Decision pending. Government to reconsider Adani wind power project. Final decision after elections. Attorney General informs court.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
වැඩිම මනාපෙන් ජනතා තේරීම මෙවරත්.
සුදේශී ඔරිජිනල් කුහුඹම තමයි.
Hi, I'm Fiza. Are you after O-levels? If you are, join our ANC Foundation program.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
From Derana, this is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Derana First at 9. I'm Tarindu Mahendra, joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and from around the world. Now, in a top story this evening, over 150,000 people across 12 districts remain affected due to the incessant rains and strong gusty winds that prompted heavy flooding island-wide. In view of the prevailing adverse weather, President Anurukumara Dissanayake instructed the Ministry of Finance to allocate additional funds for flood relief measures if necessary, supplementing the previously allocated 50 million rupee flood relief budget. Meanwhile, taking the current inclement weather into account, the Ministry of Education announced that all government schools in Colombo, Gampaha, Kalaniya, Kolonava and Kaduela educational zones will remain closed tomorrow. Due to the low-level atmospheric disturbance in the vicinity of Sri Lanka, many areas across 12 districts of the country continue to receive heavy rainfall throughout the past few days. This prompted heavy flooding in many areas in the Colombo, Kalutara, Gol, Matara and Gampaha districts. The overflowing of the river Kalani led to the inundation of several areas including Kalanimulla and Kaduela. The Colombo-Kurunegala main road remained submerged from the Jayala-Kotugoda junction as the Attanagaluoya reached spillover levels. However, the floods affecting the Gampaha district have started to recede gradually. Meanwhile, in view of the prevailing incessant rains and heavy flooding, the Ministry of Education announced that all government schools in the Gampaha, Kalaniya, Kolonava and Kaduela educational zones will remain closed tomorrow. The Education Ministry further instructed the Provincial Chief Secretaries, Provincial Education Secretaries and Directors of Education to discuss whether to open schools in areas affected by the prevailing adverse weather and take steps accordingly. Accordingly, the Western Province Education Ministry announced that all schools in the Colombo zone will remain closed tomorrow. In addition, traffic in several areas in the Kalutara district was disrupted due to the overflowing of the rivers Kalu and Kuda. The overflowing of the Hamilton Canal prompted floods in Nathandiya, Thummodara and Mavila areas. In response to the adverse weather prevailing on the island, the Sri Lanka Army deployed additional troops to assist with flood relief efforts in areas affected by rising water levels. As of today, a total of 6,500 troops have been deployed across several flood-affected areas. Meanwhile, 8 Navy flood relief teams were also dispatched to assist those impacted by floods. However, the Department of Irrigation says that the risk of possible floods in the low-lying areas along the Attanagaluoya and the river basins of rivers Kalani, Kalu and Ging is gradually decreasing. Meanwhile, the heavy rainfall that occurred on the western slopes of the Central Hills severely disrupted the livelihoods of the general public. Meanwhile, the Department of Irrigation says that the heavy rainfall persisting across the island is expected to continue in the coming days.
නමුත් අද දිනෙත් අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා බස්නාහිර සබරගමු ගාල්ල මාතර සහ උතුරු පළාතේ සාමාන්‍ය මිලිමීටර් 100 ඉක්මන වර්ෂාපතන ලැබීමේ හැකියාවන් තියෙනවා. මේ කාලේ තියෙන වැසි තත්ත්වය 17 වෙනි දින දක්වාම පවතින ලකුණු තමයි අපේ දැනට විශ්ලේෂණවල පෙන්눔 කරන්නේ.
Meanwhile, the National Building Research Organisation extended the early landslide warnings issued to several areas in 6 districts. As heavy downpours continue to affect the country, the latest reports issued by the Disaster Management Centre state that 158,391 people belonging to 40,516 families across 12 districts are affected by the prevailing adverse weather. According to the DMC reports, a total of 7,918 people belonging to 1,927 families are currently sheltering at 79 safe locations across the country. Meanwhile, this afternoon, President Anurukumara Dissanayake emphasized the need for a specific and sustainable program to address the recurring flood situation in the country and noted that frequent flooding requires long-term solutions for effective control. During a meeting at the Presidential Secretariat today with officials from the Ministries of Disaster Management and Finance, the President directed officials to prioritize immediate relief for those affected by the inclement weather. The President's office said that the President also instructed the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance to allocate additional funds if necessary for flood relief measures to supplement the previously allocated 50 million rupee flood relief budget.
Horizon Campus 2024 Intake 2. Register now. චන්දරුසුමේ කාගෙන් මන අපේ සිංහ TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්.
Welcome to Cinnamon Life, South Asia's biggest entertainment hub, where awe awaits.
කාගෙත් ප්‍රියතම මෙලිබන් බිස්කට් දැන් 30ක් සීනි අඩුවෙන්. රස දන්න කාටත්
Harisho.
Sadaharita Plantations Limited, celebrating 22 years of your trust.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Vijitha Herath asserted that Sri Lanka's debt restructuring process is nearing completion, adding that it will allow the government to proceed with the third review of the International Monetary Fund's Extended Fund Facility Programme. The minister also stated that the President has placed a special emphasis on ethical governance, elimination of corruption, efficiency in public service and building a new political culture that incorporates the rule of law, accountability and integrity. Speaking at an interaction with the Colombo-based diplomatic corps today, the Foreign Minister further noted that the government is encouraged by the support it has received from the countries and organizations represented by the diplomatic corps, adding that it looks forward to working closely with them. The interaction between the Minister of Foreign Affairs Vijitha Herath and the Colombo-based diplomatic corps took place this morning at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This event was the newly elected Foreign Minister's first interaction with the diplomatic corps.
I need to highlight we are still going through a transition election period. It is only after the parliamentary election is concluded in November that the new government will be able to fully focus on operationalizing its way forward. And we look forward to having more comprehensive engagements with each one of you. The people of Sri Lanka voted the mandate for change. As the President mentioned in his inaugural address to the nation, this change entails many steps. Earlier this month, we had productive discussions with the visiting IMF team. We will work closely with the team on the next phase relating to the extended fund facility and the related reform program. Earlier this month, The official creditor committee and the IMF have confirmed that the agreements reached with sovereign bond holders is in line with the comparability of treatment requirements and debt sustainability targets. This means that the debt restructuring process is very near completion, enabling the government to proceed towards the third review of the IMF program, further cementing economic stability. In another positive step, the World Bank signed the agreement on the reset development policy operation amounting to $200 million. The government is keen to ensure that these stabilization measures go hand in hand with improving the standard of living of all Sri Lankans and will implement practical programs to alleviate the heavy economic burden faced by them. We are committed to ensuring that economic growth is truly inclusive, which will at the same time drive growth and investment with the confidence of our private sector and business community. The President has also placed high emphasis on ethical governance, elimination of corruption, efficiency in public service, and fostering a new political culture that embodies the rule of law, accountability, and integrity. The government will protect democracy and human rights of all citizens, including addressing past issues. As directed by HE, the President, investigative authorities have already announced redoubling of investigation into number of clearly identified accountability cases that were pending from the past. The government is encouraged by the support that it has received from the countries and the organizations you represent. We look forward to working closely with all of you as partners and seek your continued support. Sri Lanka has decided to apply for the membership of the BRICS and the new development bank. We consider BRICS to be an effective partnership to realize aspiration for mutually beneficial cooperation, peace and development. On 9th October 2024, the government made a statement at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. Despite our rejection of the resolution that was tabled at the Council, we will continue to engage constructively with the Council and its regular UN human rights mechanisms. As you are well aware, Sri Lanka opposes the resolution which establishes an external mechanism on human rights issues. On the international front, we continue to remain highly concerned about the Middle East region. We continue our call for an immediate ceasefire and unrestricted humanitarian access to Gaza and a sustainable two-state solution that includes the establishment of an independent, sovereign and viable state of Palestine based on the 1967 borders. We deeply regret the attacks that injured two of our peacekeepers in United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. We are proud of our peacekeepers who serve in several challenging UN missions.
The Colombo Magistrates Court sentenced the director of WM Mendes Distilleries, Arjun Aloysius, and two others to 6 months in prison for defaulting on the payment of 3.5 billion rupees in value-added tax payments. The appeal filed by the defendants before the Colombo High Court requesting the suspension of the Magistrates Court's verdict and permission to pay the outstanding amount in installments was rejected. The case against WM Mendes and Company Limited for defaulting on 3.5 billion rupees in value-added tax between 2016 and 2019 was heard before the Colombo Magistrates Court today. The case was filed by the Inland Revenue Department requesting that the court order the company's director Arjun Aloysius along with two other defendants to settle the outstanding payments. On the 14th of November 2023, the court issued an order for the defendants to complete the due payments. The counsel for the defendants informed the court that they had filed an appeal before the Colombo High Court against the order issued by the Magistrates Court in November last year. However, it was revealed that no interim orders had been issued by the High Court to suspend the order of the Colombo Magistrates Court. The defendants were instructed to make the outstanding payments within the day. Following their failure to do so, the Colombo Additional Magistrate ordered that the defendants be imprisoned for a period of 6 months. Meanwhile, the appeal filed before the Colombo High Court requesting the suspension of the Magistrates Court's verdict and permission to pay the outstanding amount in installments was rejected. The Attorney General's Department informed the Supreme Court that the Cabinet of Ministers has decided to reconsider matters related to Adani Green Energy's wind power project in Mannar. The Attorney General's Department communicated this to the Apex Court when the fundamental rights petition seeking an order to invalidate the Cabinet approval granted for the project were taken for consideration. On the 2nd of August, the Supreme Court scheduled the consideration of the 5 fundamental rights petitions filed by various parties, including the Centre for Environmental Justice, for today. The petitioners argue that the proposed wind farm poses significant risks to ecological biodiversity and the safety of migratory birds. The respondents named in the petitions were ordered by the court to file limited objections, if any, by the 20th of August, with any counter-objections due by the 13th of September. When the case was taken for consideration today, Deputy Solicitor General Avanti Pereira, appearing on behalf of the Attorney General, informed the court that the Cabinet of Ministers had decided to reconsider facts related to the matter and would make a decision regarding the continuation of the project. The Deputy Solicitor General further requested an extension of proceedings to communicate the final decision, which will be made by the new Cabinet to be appointed after the upcoming general election. The petitioners, who agreed with the facts presented by the Deputy Solicitor General, requested permission from the 5-member judge bench to revise their petitions, as the respondents in the case have changed following the formation of the new government. The Supreme Court granted permission to amend the petitions and ordered that any government observations related to the matter be filed by the 31st of January next year. The petitions were scheduled to be recalled for consideration on the 18th and 19th of March 2025.
Sri Lanka decides 2024.
The Election Commission is scheduled to convene a meeting tomorrow with the secretaries of the political parties contesting the 2024 parliamentary election to reach a consensus on the campaign expenditure limit for the election. The meeting is mandated by the Regulation of Election Expenditure Act, which will be in effect during the general election. Meanwhile, postal voting for the LPTA Pradesh Sabha election was conducted earlier today. The Election Commission is set to hold a meeting tomorrow with the secretaries of the political parties contesting this year's parliamentary election to reach a consensus on the campaign expenditure limit for the election.
The meeting with the secretaries of political parties regarding the limiting of campaign expenditure for the parliamentary election is scheduled for tomorrow. After obtaining all relevant information, the Election Commission will decide on the maximum amount of money that can be spent by the candidates of each political party. Further, district returning officers will hold discussions with the leaders of the independent groups contesting in the relevant district and decide on the maximum amount of money that can be spent by the independent groups. Additionally, we intend to hold a discussion with heads of media institutions tomorrow and with secretaries and additional secretaries of ministries and heads of state corporations and statutory boards the day after tomorrow on their conduct during the coming days.
The Election Commission also commented on the preparations for postal voting in the general election.
We intend to issue the postal ballots for the parliamentary election on the 23rd of this month. Employees of all election officers, district secretariats, government institutions that maintain offices in district secretariats and police personnel can mark their postal ballots on the 30th of October and on the 4th of November. Employees of all other government institutions and army personnel can mark their postal ballots on the 1st and 4th of November. The 7th and 8th of November have been allocated as additional dates for postal voting for voters who find it difficult to cast their votes on the initial dates. Steps have been taken to issue official poll cards for the election on the 26th of October.
Meanwhile, the marking of postal ballots for the LPTA Pradesh Sabha election was conducted earlier today. 1,576 voters were eligible to cast postal votes for the LPTA local government election. Friday, the 18th of October has been allocated as an additional date for postal voting for voters who were unable to mark their postal ballots today. Polling for the LPTA Pradesh Sabha election will be conducted on the 26th of this month. Even though 10 recognized political parties and 2 independent groups placed deposits for the election, only 8 political parties and 1 independent group submitted nominations. Leader of the Pivituru Helaurume, Uday Gammampila, warned that he will publicly release the 2 Presidential Investigation Committee reports regarding the Easter Sunday attacks if the government does not publish them within the week. Addressing a media briefing, Gammampila asserted that the key reports do not have missing pages, nor are they missing entirely, as Cabinet spokesperson Minister Vijitha Herath previously claimed when queried on the matter.
ජනාධිපතිතුමා කටුවාපිටිය පල්ලියට පසුගියදා ගියේ හිස් අතින්
The president recently visited St. Sebastian's Church in Katuapitiya empty-handed. During a media briefing last Monday, I stated that the president should have brought the 2 Presidential Investigation Committee reports with him during his visit. We also urged the government to publish these 2 reports promptly. When journalists inquired Cabinet spokesperson Minister Vijitha Herath about this matter, he replied that some reports had missing pages and that some were missing entirely. Later, he stated that they would investigate the issue. However, we can inform Minister Vijitha Herath with certainty that the reports on the Easter Sunday attacks do not have missing pages, nor are they missing entirely. Even though the government, the Attorney General's Department or the Presidential Secretariat could not locate these reports, we have already received them. Therefore, if the President does not publish these 2 Presidential Investigation Committee reports regarding the Easter Sunday attacks within the next 7 days, we would like to warn the government that we will publish them. When these reports are released, those who are delusional about our President Anurukumara Disanayake will come to understand the reality of the current government.
අනුරපානයෙන් මත්වී සිටින ජනතාවට ආණ්ඩුවේ කටයුතු වල සැබෑ තත්ත්වය දැනගැනීමට ලැබේවි.
Leader and Gampaha District Parliamentary candidate of Sarva Jana Balaya, Dilith Jayavira, assures that his alliance will create a peer political environment for local politicians whose reputations were tarnished due to the misconduct of the leaders of mainstream political parties. Addressing the media, Jayavira also highlighted the need to form a powerful and courageous opposition in the country to meet the expectations of the public, adding that Sarva Jana Balaya is ready to take on that responsibility. Several former members of local government bodies joined Sarva Jana Balaya today. Accordingly, former chairman of the Attanagalla Pradeshiya Sabha Priyantha Pushpakumara, former chairman of Mirigama Pradeshiya Sabha Sarath Nandasiri Ranatunga, former vice chairman of Biyagama Pradeshiya Sabha Kalum Tushara, former vice chairman of Kalaniya Pradeshiya Sabha Lanka Vijitha Kumara and former member of the Kalaniya Pradeshiya Sabha Tushara Ashoka Kumara joined Sarva Jana Balaya. Meanwhile, former Gampaha Pradeshiya Sabha member Anjana Srinath was appointed as the Gampaha district organizer of the Sarva Jana Balaya, while Jayanta Atapattu was appointed the Gampaha district chief organizer of the alliance.
දිවයිනේ දිස්ත්‍රික්ක 22කටම ඉතාම සාර්ථකව නාම යෝජනා බාර දීමට පුළුවන් වුණා.
We successfully completed the submission of our nominations for the 22 electoral districts for the forthcoming general election. We have already started our campaign for the election. The reputations of local government members were tarnished due to the behavior and principles of some corrupt political leaders. This was mainly caused by the corrupt transactions of certain political leaders. However, we will rectify all of these mistakes. As a result, people's representatives in almost every district joined hands with us.
ජනතා නියෝජනයක් ඇති නායකයින් අපි එකතු කරගන්න. අපි ආරාධනය කරනවා.
We invite all local government members across the country to join Sarva Jana Balaya. We invite them to join us irrespective of their position within their local government body. You have a place to start your journey and it is by joining Sarva Jana Balaya.
සර්ව ජන බලය හැටියට නිර්මාණය වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
ඔබතුමා විපක්ෂ නායකයා වෙන්න ඒ පාර හදන්නේ. එතකොට සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාසට මොකද වෙන්නේ?
එතුමා දැන් විපක්ෂ නායක ධූරයෙන් විශ්‍රාම.
It is high time that he relinquish from the position of opposition leader. I believe that even his own party members think the same. We believe that the people need a powerful opposition in the country. Therefore, we aim to form a powerful and a courageous opposition in the country.
සර්ව ජන බලය කේන්ද්‍රීය එඩිතර විපක්ෂයක් නිර්මාණය කිරීම තමයි අපේ අරමුණ.
Sri Lanka decides 2024.
Now, with the deadline for candidates who contested the recent presidential election to submit their campaign expenses expiring at midnight yesterday, the Election Commission revealed that 35 out of the 38 presidential candidates submitted the relevant reports before the deadline. Executive Director of the People's Action for Free and Fair Elections, Rohan Hettiarachchi, asserted that the 3 candidates who failed to submit their expenditure reports face the risk of losing the right of franchise as well as the right to contest elections for a period of 3 years. Pursuant to the provisions of the Regulation of Election Expenditure Act, candidates who contest a presidential election are required to submit their campaign expense reports to the Election Commission within 21 days of the poll. Accordingly, the period within which the candidates who contested the recent presidential election were to submit their expense reports expired at midnight last night. The Election Commission revealed that out of the 38 candidates who contested the election, only 35 have submitted their expense reports before the deadline. However, Battaramulle Sheila Ratanathera, Sarath Kirtiratne and Parkes Selvam Ariyanethan are yet to submit their campaign expense reports. The Election Commission stated that legal proceedings would be initiated against the candidates who failed to submit their expense reports.
The party of one of the candidates who has failed to submit their expense report has submitted nominations for the parliamentary election. However, if the leader of the relevant party fails to submit the expenditure report for his presidential election campaign, he will lose the right of franchise and the right to contest elections for a period of 3 years. If legal proceedings are initiated in the coming days, this candidate and his party face the threat of being barred from contesting the parliamentary election. We as election observers intend to scrutinize the presidential candidate's income and expenditure reports and assess whether the reports are satisfactory. If the reports are deficient, we will investigate what legal action could be taken against them. Police have the power to take action against candidates who fail to submit election income and expenditure reports.
The Chinese embassy in Colombo says that China is closely following the recent arrests of Chinese nationals in Sri Lanka for suspected online fraud and is supporting the Sri Lankan law enforcement agencies in cracking down on them while ensuring their rights and interests are protected in accordance with the law. Issuing a statement, the Chinese embassy highlighted that these cases not only pose a threat to the property of the two nations, but also damages China's image and affects the traditional friendship between the two countries. The Chinese embassy further emphasized that due to Sri Lanka's advantages in telecommunications, infrastructure, geographical location and friendly relations with China, some criminals involved in online frauds have moved to Sri Lanka to continue to engage in fraud activities targeting Chinese citizens at home and abroad.
Fast track your career from O-levels with eSoft.
කාගෙත් ප්‍රියතම මෙලිබන් බිස්කට් දැන් 30ක් සීනි අඩුවෙන්. රස දන්න කාටත්
හරිෂෝ.
දරුවන් ගැන ඒ තරම්ම හිතන නිසයි ලංකාවේ අම්මලා විශ්වාසයෙන් මෙලිබන් කිරිම දෙන්නේ.
After O-levels, start your Australian university degree in just 8 months with ACBT's Foundation Program. Enrollments close on 21st October. Call 071 115 1234 for Colombo or 077 011 3223 for Kandy.
Welcome back. In your stock update, the Colombo Bourse closed in red today as a result of price losses in food and staples retailing and banking counters, with the turnover crossing 1.4 billion rupees. The benchmark all share price index closed 0.39% lower at 12,246.22 points. The S&P Sri Lanka 20 lost 0.71% to end the session at 3,614.78 points. Foreign participation in market activity remained at subdued levels, with foreigners closing as net buyers. And up next, we have Kavya Senadira from Capital Alliance with a few thoughts to round off our Market Seed Move segment for the week.
Last week, the domestic share market saw an upward trend. The S&P Sri Lanka 20 grew 2.8% to 3,641 from 3,543, while the ASPI increased 2% from 12,053 to 12,294. Turnover fell by 19% to 10.2 billion rupees. The government raised 85 billion rupees last week through treasury bill auctions. During the auction, interest rates on 3, 6 and 12 months bills fell by 37, 42 and 4 basis points, respectively. In terms of treasury bonds, the government raised 95 billion rupees through a 28 and 2032 bond, with interest rates rising by 7 basis points and falling by 89 basis points, respectively.
And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining and have a good night.